The second this story broke, the entire WNBA world froze. No build-up, no warning, just pure chaos. 1 minute Angel Reese was trending for highlights. The next minute her name was attached to the most dangerous word in professional sports. Lawsuit. Not trade rumors. Not benching whispers. A full-blown organizational fracture. And suddenly, everyone was asking the same brutal question. Did Angel Reese just quit on the Chicago Sky? Or did the Sky finally quit on her? Because this isn't about one missed game. This isn't about a sore back or a day-to-day status. This is about a franchise that feels abandoned, a locker room that feels betrayed, and a star player whose image is collapsing in real time. Reports say she refused to travel. Again, fans noticed the energy shift the moment she disappeared. The Sky started moving the ball faster, playing freer, winning differently, and that terrified people. Because when a team looks better without its supposed leader, alarms start screaming behind closed doors. Social media didn't whisper, it attacked. She quit. Pattern behavior. Same movie, different season. Every past injury resurfaced. Every rivalry replayed. Caitlin Clark's name was dragged into the fire again. Leadership comparisons exploded. And then came the nuclear rumor legal action. Not discipline. Not fines. Sued. For abandoning obligations. For crossing lines you don't cross in this league. Angel Reese built her brand on confidence, edge and defiance. But confidence turns into arrogance when accountability disappears. And defiance turns into isolation when teammates stop defending you. Right now, the Sky are sinking. The league is watching. And Angel Reese is standing at the edge of the most dangerous cliff of her career. Because if this narrative sticks, there's no PR comeback fast enough to stop what comes next. Angel Reese didn't arrive in Chicago quietly. She arrived like a storm with cameras already rolling, expectations already suffocating, and a reputation built on swagger, defiance, and never backing down. From the moment she put on a Sky jersey, the franchise didn't just market her as a player, they sold her as an identity, the face of a rebuild, the culture, the personality that would drag relevance, attention, and revenue back into a franchise desperate to matter again. And for a while, it worked. Jerseys flew. Social media numbers spiked. Every Sky game became an event, not because of wins, but because of her. But underneath the branding, the cracks were already forming. Angel came into the league carrying emotional baggage from college, the constant comparisons, the rivalry narratives, the pressure of being labeled the villain or the hero, depending on who was holding the mic. She learned early that attention was a currency, and she leaned into it hard, sometimes too hard. Confidence became armor, trash talk became defense, and any criticism was treated like betrayal. Chicago embraced the edge at first. They needed it. They needed something loud enough to drown out losing. Then reality hit. The losses stacked, injuries piled up, and the gap between image and impact started to widen. Angel wasn't just playing through pain, she was carrying the weight of expectations that no rookie, no second-year player, no single human should ever carry alone. And instead of slowing down, the spotlight only got hotter. Every missed game turned into a headline. Every absence sparked theories. Every quote was dissected like a confession. The word leader was attached to her name before she ever got the chance to grow into it. Inside the locker room, the dynamic shifted. Veterans watched closely. Some understood the pressure. Others felt the strain. When comments surfaced about needing better players and non-negotiable changes, it didn't land like ambition, it landed like accusation. And once trust fractures in a locker room, it doesn't heal quietly. It bleeds into practices, into huddles, into silence. Angel may not have meant to isolate herself, but slowly, unintentionally, she did. The more she defended herself publicly, the more distance grew privately. Meanwhile, the organization started changing its tone. Subtle at first, less promotional focus, fewer public defenses. The franchise that once wrapped its arms around her began to hesitate, not because they didn't value her talent, but because availability, commitment, and stability matter more than branding when seasons collapse, and when injuries linger without clarity, when travel decisions raise eyebrows. When leadership is questioned, front offices don't panic publicly, they document quietly. Angel Reese didn't wake up one day and decide to disappear. This was a slow erosion, a collision between expectation and exhaustion, between being marketed as a savior and being human enough to crack under it. And now, with whispers of internal conflict, alleged legal tensions, and a franchise that looks emotionally detached, the past is no longer background noise, it's evidence. Because when the story shifts from "she's under pressure" to "this keeps happening," history stops being context. and starts becoming a case file. And the most dangerous part, Angel Reese knows the narrative is slipping out of her control. And that realization is what sets the stage for everything that's about to explode next. Before the lawsuits, before the missed road trips, before the whispers of quitting and betrayal, Angel Reese's story was already loaded with emotional scars that most fans conveniently forget. She didn't just enter the WNBA as another talented rookie. She entered carrying years of scrutiny, judgment, and a narrative that had been forced onto her long before Chicago ever called her name. From college onward, Angel learned one brutal lesson early: if you don't control the narrative will destroy you. So she fought it with confidence so loud it sounded like arrogance, with celebrations so bold it offended people who were never meant to be comfortable anyway. At LSU, she was crowned and condemned at the same time, loved by her supporters, demonized by critics, and constantly compared to players who were never asked to carry the same cultural weight. Every win was questioned, every gesture was dissected, every loss became proof that she was too much. That pressure didn't disappear when she went pro, it multiplied. Chicago didn't just draft a player, they drafted a storyline, a lightning rod, someone who would bring attention whether the team was ready for it or not. Angel arrived in Chicago believing this was her reset, a chance to be the franchise cornerstone, the voice, the tone setter, and at first, the Sky leaned into it. They let her be outspoken, let her brand grow, let her carry the public face of a struggling rebuild, but internally, that kind of role comes with invisible expectations. You're supposed to lead even when losing. You're supposed to show up even when hurt. You're supposed to absorb blame quietly while still selling hope. That's not something Angel had ever been taught. She'd been taught to fight back, to clap back, to never let criticism go unanswered. As losses piled up, the emotional toll deepened. Angel wasn't just frustrated with results, she was frustrated with feeling alone in the responsibility. She felt like the franchise wanted her image but not her voice, her grind but not her frustration, her loyalty but not her honesty. And when she spoke publicly about needing better players, she believed she was showing ambition. What her teammates heard was blame. What veterans heard was disrespect. What the front office heard was instability. At the same time, her body started breaking down. Real pain mixed with mental exhaustion, and suddenly every injury became suspicious, every absence controversial. Instead of being allowed to heal quietly, Angel's injuries became part of the debate. Was she hurt? Or was she checking out? Was she protecting herself? Or protecting her brand? Those questions followed her everywhere on social media, in locker rooms, and reportedly inside front office meetings. Angel's confidence, once her shield, began isolating her. She doubled down publicly because privately she felt cornered. The more she defended herself, the more people accused her of deflecting. The more she stayed away, the more people questioned her commitment. It became a loop she couldn't escape. And while fans argued online, the organization quietly started documenting patterns instead of moments. This wasn't a sudden implosion, it was a slow emotional burnout layered on top of impossible expectations. Angel Reese didn't just feel criticized, she felt misunderstood. And when athletes feel unheard long enough, they don't explode immediately. They withdraw, they detach, they protect themselves in ways that look selfish from the outside but feel like survival on the inside. By the time the season spiraled, and legal tension allegedly entered the picture, the emotional damage was already done. Trust was thin, patience was gone, and Angel Reese wasn't just fighting critics anymore. She was fighting the realization that the franchise she thought needed her might already be preparing to move on. And that's when the real conflict began. Because once belief breaks on both sides, the fallout is never quiet. The tension finally snapped the moment the Chicago Sky stopped defending Angel Reese behind closed doors and started protecting themselves instead. What fans saw as silence was actually distance. What looked like patience was documentation. And what Angel believed was loyalty slowly turned into a cold, calculated evaluation of risk. Because once a franchise starts asking lawyers questions instead of coaches, the relationship is already on life support. Instead of coaches, the relationship is already on life support. Sources around the league began whispering that internal meetings weren't about rotations anymore. They were about optics, contracts, and precedent. About what happens when a franchise player becomes a liability instead of a stabilizer. Angel could feel it. The energy shifted. Fewer check-ins, fewer public endorsements. Her absences stopped being framed as recovery and started being framed as situations. That's when paranoia met reality, and neither side trusted the other enough to blink first. Then came the first real shock. Reports surfaced that the Sky were reviewing missed travel, media comments, and conduct clauses line by line. Not emotionally, legally. The kind of review that doesn't happen unless someone upstairs believes a line may have already been crossed. Angel wasn't hearing this directly. She was hearing it through silence, through tone changes, through the way staff avoided eye contact, through the sudden feeling that she was being observed instead of supported. The locker room felt it too. Teammates stopped defending her publicly, not because they hated her, but because they didn't know what to say anymore. Every quote became a headline. Every absence became ammunition. Veterans were tired of answering questions they didn't cause. Younger players were confused about leadership they couldn't rely on. And Angel, instead of reappearing to reclaim the narrative, stayed away believing distance would cool things down, not realizing it was confirming every fear management already had. The twist hit hard when insiders claimed the organization felt blindsided by her public comments about the roster. Not because stars can't be critical, but because she did it without alignment, without warning, without internal consensus, in front of cameras. To them, that wasn't honesty, it was exposure. And in a struggling franchise already dealing with off-court pressure, exposure is the last thing you tolerate. That's when the framing changed internally. Angel Reese was no longer the future. She was the variable, a factor that made planning harder instead of clearer. The moment a front office starts viewing a player that way, everything becomes conditional, support becomes cautious, communication becomes formal, and trust starts requiring receipts. Angel, meanwhile, felt betrayed. She believed she'd been sold one vision and punished for living it. She thought being outspoken was part of her value, that her brand, her confidence, her fire were exactly why Chicago wanted her. So when she sensed legal tension, not conversations, not mediation, but quiet escalation, it felt like the ultimate slap in the face. After everything she carried, after everything she took on publicly, after being the lightning rod while the franchise rebuilt in her shadow. And then came the moment no one expected, reports that the Sky were considering formal action, tied to abandonment language. Not an accusation blasted publicly, a process started privately. That's when panic set in, because lawsuits aren't about feelings, they're about leverage. And once that door opens, there's no such thing as just basketball anymore. Angel didn't respond with a statement. She didn't jump online to clarify. She went quiet, too quiet. And in the WNBA, silence isn't neutral, it's interpreted. Fans split instantly. Some said the Sky were protecting themselves from chaos. Others said they were turning on the very player they built their brand around. Social media exploded. But the most dangerous thing wasn't the noise, it was the lack of denial from either side. That was the first shocking realization. This wasn't a rumor being squashed. This was a situation being managed. And once the league realized this wasn't drama, but strategy, the question shifted from who's right, to something far darker, who's about to lose everything. The second twist detonated when league insiders quietly confirmed that the situation had moved beyond internal tension and into something far more dangerous. The league office was now aware, not involved yet, not intervening, but watching. And in professional sports, being watched by the league without protection from your franchise is the loneliest place a player can be. Angel Reese didn't just feel iced out by Chicago anymore. She felt exposed. Because once a team stops shielding you from scrutiny, every absence gets magnified, every quote gets reinterpreted, and every past moment gets replayed with a different tone. Suddenly, clips that once felt like confidence started getting framed as entitlement. Interviews that once felt honest were now labeled reckless. And the narrative began to run without her permission. What made it worse was the timing. Other stars were rehabbing in public, traveling with teams, sitting courtside, smiling through injuries. Angel wasn't. Whether fair or not, perception turned ruthless. Fans began asking why leadership looked optional. Media began asking why accountability seemed selective. And front offices across the league began asking a much colder question: is she worth the noise? Behind the scenes, Chicago's posture hardened. The language shifted from support to obligation, from understanding to documentation. Meetings weren't about reconciliation anymore, they were about protection. Protection from grievances, protection from precedent, protection from being painted as the villain if things went public. The Sky weren't planning an explosion, they were bracing for one. Angel sensed the walls closing in. Friends close to her say she felt cornered, not by the league, not by fans, but by the realization that the franchise she believed needed her might actually believe it could survive without her. And that realization cuts deeper than any headline, because it threatens the one thing stars cling to when things fall apart: Leverage that, then came the quiet leak that changed everything. Word spread that internal performance evaluations showed the team's pace, spacing, and turnover rate improved during her absences. No one announced it, no one celebrated it, but analytics don't lie, and front offices trust numbers more than emotions. Once those numbers circulated internally, the debate wasn't about talent anymore. It was about fit. And fit is negotiable. Angel didn't go public, but those close to her say she was furious. Not loud, not chaotic, but stunned, because in her mind, she had been carrying the weight of the franchise's relevance. She had absorbed criticism, she had been the headline, the lightning rod, the face, and now she was being reduced to a line item in a report. The locker room fractured quietly. Some teammates felt relief. Fewer cameras, fewer questions, less pressure. Others felt uneasy, knowing how quickly loyalty can flip in this league. No one spoke on it publicly, but the silence was telling. There were no posts defending her, no quotes calling her absence temporary, just neutral answers and eyes on the floor. Fans noticed. And once fans notice emotional distance, they fill it with theories. Trade rumors ignited overnight. Lawsuits speculation turned into certainty online. Commentators stopped asking when will she return, and started asking where does she go next. And Angel, watching this spiral without control, realized something terrifying. The story no longer needed her participation to keep moving. That's when desperation crept in, not desperation to play, but desperation to regain narrative control. Because for the first time in her career, Angel Reese wasn't being debated for her potential or her impact, she was being evaluated for her reliability. And that label, once attached, follows players into every negotiation, every trade call, every closed-door meeting. The second twist wasn't legal papers or official announcements, it was subtler. It was the realization that Chicago didn't need to make a dramatic move to win this situation. All they had to do was wait. Let silence do the damage. Let absence answer the questions. Let the league and fans come to their own conclusions. And the most chilling part, it was working. Because as the season slipped further out of reach, as attention shifted elsewhere, as new stars filled the highlight reels, Angel Reese faced a reality she'd never had to confront before. Relevance in this league isn't permanent. It has to be reinforced. Daily, publicly, relentlessly. And if she didn't reappear soon, not with words, not with posts, but with presence, the next headline wouldn't be about conflict or controversy. It would be about replacement. And once a franchise starts imagining life after you, the countdown has already begun. What really cracked the situation wide open was the moment people started rewinding the tape. Not highlights, not stat lines, behavior patterns, timelines, because once fans realized this wasn't a single disappearance, the story shifted from controversy to pattern recognition. 3 seasons, 3 different leagues, 3 moments where the pressure peaked, and Angel Reese vanished right before the finish line. That's when the narrative stopped being emotional and started becoming forensic. In Chicago, whispers had already been circulating long before anything leaked publicly. Coaches quietly adjusted rotations. Assistants started designing sets that didn't revolve around her touches, not as punishment as preparation, because availability is currency in this league, and unpredictability drains trust faster than bad shooting nights ever could. When a franchise starts planning for contingency instead of commitment, that's the first betrayal, and it cuts both ways. Then came the first truly shocking twist. Sources close to the team began suggesting that internal frustration wasn't just about missed games. It was about communication, or the lack of it. Teammates didn't know when she'd play, staff didn't know when she'd travel, fans didn't know what to believe. Day-to-day turned into a running joke, and jokes turn into resentment fast, especially in a locker room fighting to survive relevance. The Indiana Fever game became the breaking point, not because of the loss Chicago had been losing, but because of the optics. The biggest matchup, the most watched opponent, Caitlin Clark on the other side, injured but present, traveling, visible, engaged, and Angel Reese, nowhere. Not courtside, not benchside, not even in the frame. For many inside the league, that wasn't injury management, that was abandonment. Optics. And optics are everything. Behind closed doors, the tone reportedly changed overnight. No more protecting her image. No more "we'll handle it internally" assurances. Instead, conversations turned legal, not hostile, calculated. Obligations, contracts, precedent. What happens if this behavior becomes normalized? What message does that send to rookies, to veterans, to future free agents watching how Chicago handles its stars. That's when the word nobody wanted to hear entered the chat. Breach not announced, not filed publicly, but discussed, quietly, carefully, because even floating that concept changes the power dynamic instantly. Suddenly, Angel Reese wasn't negotiating from stardom. She was defending from exposure. And in the WNBA, where narratives move faster than paperwork, that's a dangerous place to stand. Angel, meanwhile, felt blindsided. From her perspective, she had carried the franchise's relevance, taken the heat, driven engagement, sold jerseys, brought cameras, and now, when she wasn't physically available, the organization she believed needed her was questioning her commitment instead of protecting her image. That felt like betrayal, and betrayal fuels anger far faster than criticism ever could. Social media turned savage. Fans split into camps. One side screamed mental health and player autonomy. The other screamed quitter and pattern. Old LSU debates resurfaced. Unrivaled footage got reposted. Even her all-star push was reframed as opportunistic. Nothing existed in isolation anymore. Everything was evidence. The locker room stayed quiet, and that silence was louder than any statement. No mass defense. No rallying posts. Just neutral quotes and professional distance. That's when people realized the damage wasn't theoretical. It was already done, because in this league, stars don't lose their spots because of one bad season. They lose them when teams stop believing the chaos is temporary. When executives start asking if the brand is worth the volatility. When coaches start wondering if leadership can be taught or if it has to be shown. Angel Reese wasn't just fighting an injury narrative anymore. She was fighting the most unforgiving opponent in professional sports, doubt. And doubt doesn't need proof. It only needs repetition. The shocking truth was this: Chicago didn't have to sue her, trade her, or even suspend her to win this standoff. All they had to do was let the questions linger, let fans connect dots, let other teams hesitate, let silence rewrite her story. And as the season slipped further away, one terrifying realization began to sink in. If she didn't reassert control soon, the league would move on without asking her permission. Because the WNBA always does. And the next move, whether it comes from Chicago, the league office, or Angel herself, won't just decide her future with the sky. It will decide whether she's still seen as a franchise player, or a cautionary tale. What followed next pushed everything from speculation into full-blown chaos, because once the league started reacting, there was no putting the genie back in the bottle. Behind the scenes, executives from other teams started asking uncomfortable questions. Not about her talent, that part was never debated, but about reliability. Availability. One GM reportedly said, "If she's unhappy here, what happens when she's unhappy with us?" And that single sentence spread like wildfire across front offices. Because stars get frustrated everywhere. But not every star disappears when things go left. Then came the second major twist, and this one blindsided even her most loyal supporters. Insiders leaked that Chicago had quietly begun documenting everything: missed travel, missed appearances, internal communications, medical timelines, not to punish, but to protect themselves. Because if this situation ever escalated legally or publicly, the sky needed to prove one thing above all else: that this wasn't emotional fallout, it was operational breakdown. That's when Angel's camp reportedly realized the power dynamic had flipped. For months, she had spoken from a position of leverage, franchise face, media magnet, the player everyone talked about, even when the team lost. But now, the narrative wasn't how does Chicago keep Angel happy, it was how does Chicago survive the Angel Reese era without imploding. And once a franchise starts asking that question, the end is closer than anyone wants to admit. Angel's reaction was raw, emotional, furious. Sources described her as feeling ambushed, saying she believed the organization would always shield her publicly, no matter what happened privately. Instead, the silence felt like abandonment. No statements, no glowing social posts, no get-well-soon messaging. Just distance, cold, professional distance. On social media, the temperature exploded. Some fans doubled down, calling Chicago ungrateful, accusing the franchise of exploiting her popularity and discarding her the moment things got inconvenient. Others weren't as kind. Clips resurfaced. Quotes were replayed. The non-negotiable roster comments hit differently now. What once sounded ambitious now sounded dismissive. And the internet, ruthless as ever, started rewriting her story in real time. Meanwhile, comparisons to Caitlin Clark grew unavoidable, not because of race, not because of rivalry, But because of optics, Clark injured. She traveled. She sat benchside. She stayed visible. She leaned into leadership even when she couldn't contribute physically. Angel's absence created a vacuum, and vacuums invite comparison whether you ask for it or not. Inside the locker room, morale reportedly shifted. Younger players stopped looking for direction. Veterans focused inward. Chemistry fractured quietly. Not through shouting matches but through disengagement. That's the kind of fracture that never makes headlines, but kills seasons. And then came the most damaging whisper of all. Trade reluctance. Not trade talks. Trade reluctance. Teams weren't lining up. They were waiting, watching, seeing if Chicago would blink first. Because acquiring Angel Reese now didn't just mean adding a star, it meant inheriting a storm. Media scrutiny, fan polarization, locker room recalibration. Some franchises thrive on that, others avoid it like a landmine. Angel Reese wasn't being erased, she was being paused. And for a player built on momentum, that's terrifying. Because the league doesn't wait for anyone to figure themselves out, it moves. Quickly, relentlessly. New stars emerge, new narratives dominate. And if you're not visible for the right reasons, you become visible for all the wrong ones. As the weeks passed, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't about a back injury anymore. It wasn't about one missed trip. It wasn't even about Chicago, it was about whether Angel Reese could regain control of a story that was rapidly slipping out of her hands, or whether the league had already decided to move on without her. And, with every day of silence, every unanswered question, every game she didn't appear in, the countdown grew louder because the next chapter isn't going to be written quietly, it's going to explode. The fallout didn't slow down, it multiplied. What nobody saw coming was how fast the league itself began to close ranks. Not publicly, not with statements or press releases, but through behavior. Angel's name stopped coming up in league promos. Her highlights weren't being pushed. The usual hype machine, silent. That kind of silence isn't accidental, it's deliberate. And in this league, silence is louder than criticism. Behind closed doors, Chicago executives reportedly held crisis meetings that had nothing to do with wins or losses. The agenda was simple and brutal. Contain the damage. Lawyers, PR consultants, league liaisons. Because once the word sued entered the conversation, whether formally or through whispers, everything changed. This was no longer a basketball issue. This was brand risk, and Angel felt it. Sources say she spiraled the moment she realized the Sky weren't rushing to defend her. No Instagram post. No vague statement of support. No, we're handling things internally. Just distance, clean, calculated. The kind of distance that tells you you're no longer being protected, you're being evaluated. Her inner circle reportedly urged her to respond, to say something, anything. But that was the trap, because every word now carried legal weight, emotional weight, career weight. One wrong post and the narrative could flip from mistreated star to liability. And Angel knew it, so she went quiet. That silence triggered chaos. Fans filled the vacuum with theories. Some claimed the Sky were punishing her for speaking out. Others believed the lawsuit rumors meant the organization was preparing to cut ties completely. Screenshots were dissected. Old interviews resurfaced. Every clip where she talked about non-negotiables was replayed with new venom. What once sounded like confidence now felt like entitlement to critics, who were already sharpening knives. Then came the locker room leak. Then came the locker room leak. A report surfaced claiming several players felt relieved by her absence. Not because she wasn't talented, but because the pressure lifted. No more walking on eggshells. No more wondering who might be called out next. Whether true or not, the damage was immediate. Because once teammates are perceived as relieved without you, your leadership is officially under question, and leadership is everything. Meanwhile, comparisons to Caitlin Clark became unavoidable again, not because of rivalry, but because of response. Clark faced adversity and leaned into the team. Angel faced adversity and disappeared. That contrast hardened public opinion fast. Fair or not, optics decide legacies. Angel reportedly watched it all unravel in real time. The memes, the debates, the what went wrong threads. She wasn't just losing control of the narrative, she was watching it be rewritten without her permission. And then came the most chilling development yet. A league insider hinted that Chicago had begun exploring post-Reese roster strategy. Not trade talks, not extensions. Strategy, the kind of language teams use when they're preparing for life after someone, when they've emotionally detached. For a player who once believed she was untouchable, that realization hit harder than any ranking, any injury. Any loss? Because stars can survive criticism. They can survive bad seasons. But when a franchise starts planning around your absence, that's when the clock starts ticking. And the scariest part, Angel Reese hasn't responded yet. Not publicly, not directly, not definitively. Which means whatever comes next won't be a clarification, it'll be a confrontation. And when that moment arrives, it won't just decide her future in Chicago. It could redefine her place in the entire league. And when the confrontation finally came, it didn't arrive with a press conference or a headline. It arrived with leaks. Late-night whispers turned into early morning screenshots. Private conversations, allegedly from inside the organization, began circulating in group chats and burner accounts. Nothing officially confirmed, nothing officially denied, but the message was unmistakable. Chicago felt burned, not just disappointed, burned. The sense inside the building wasn't anger anymore. It was exhaustion. One insider described it as walking on glass for months. Every practice, every media day, every loss magnified. Angel wasn't just a player, she was a lightning rod. And when lightning keeps striking the same place, eventually the structure collapses. That's when the third twist detonated. A report surfaced claiming that Chicago had formally raised concerns with the league office about conduct detrimental to team operations, not performance, not injuries, operations. That phrasing matters, because once that language enters the conversation, the league isn't asking who's right. They're asking who's sustainable. Angels camp reportedly exploded after hearing that. They believed the organization was reframing the story to protect itself, that Chicago was quietly positioning her as the problem before she could leave on her own terms. And from Angel's perspective, it felt like betrayal layered on betrayal. She gave them headlines, visibility, relevance, and now, when things got uncomfortable, she felt discarded. Her reaction behind the scenes was described as emotional, chaotic, and raw. Friends said she felt humiliated, not by fans, not by critics, but by the silence of the franchise she thought would always back her. That silence hurt more than any tweet ever could. Meanwhile, the public fallout went nuclear. Fans split into factions. One side screamed injustice, claiming Chicago used Angel's popularity and tossed her aside when she stopped playing the role they wanted. The other side unloaded months of frustration, calling her unreliable, selfish, a distraction. Hashtags trended, spaces erupted, every debate turned toxic within minutes, and then the sponsors started watching. No statements, no dropped deals, just observation. Because brands don't panic, they calculate. And when uncertainty lingers too long, hesitation follows. That's when careers stall quietly. Without announcements, Angel Reese wasn't cancelled, she was paused. And pauses are dangerous in a league that moves on fast. The final blow came when a respected analyst said on air, "This isn't about talent anymore, it's about trust." That sentence cut deeper than any ranking ever could, because trust is the one thing you can't stat pad your way into. As the season limped forward, Chicago played on. Wins didn't matter, losses didn't matter. The story had eclipsed the scoreboard. Every game without her felt like a statement. Every day without clarity felt heavier. And Angel Reese, she was left staring at a future filled with questions no one was answering for her. Trade, exit, reinvention, redemption, or something far worse, irrelevance, because the league has a brutal rule. It never announces out loud. If you disappear long enough, someone else takes your place. And the scariest part, there are already players waiting, hungry, quiet, ready, and they don't need the spotlight to survive. By the time the dust started to settle, the damage was already irreversible. Inside league circles, the conversation had quietly shifted from what's going on with Angel Reese to what's next without her. And that shift, subtle, cold, and surgical, is the most dangerous one of all. Because once the league stops centering you in the future, you become a problem of the past. Sources close to Chicago revealed that internal meetings now included one chilling phrase on repeat: reset the culture. Not rebuild, not reload, reset. That's code for erasing a chapter entirely. And Angel Reese's name, no longer spoken with caution, spoken with finality. Behind the scenes, league executives reportedly warned Chicago about escalation, not because Angel was wronged, but because prolonged chaos threatens everyone. Ratings, sponsorships, narrative control. The WNBA has spent years fighting for stability, and one uncontrollable storyline can undo months of progress. Angel wasn't just a player anymore, she was a variable. That realization crushed her. Those close to her say she oscillated between fury and disbelief. One moment convinced she was being targeted, the next convinced she had been naive, trusting an organization that only valued her while things were profitable. Her confidence cracked, not publicly, but privately. And that's when the most dangerous emotion crept in. Panic. Because panic makes stars rush. And rushing leads to mistakes. Her camp allegedly explored options, quietly back channels, feeling out interest. The response: polite, non-committal, hesitant. Teams weren't saying no, but they weren't saying yes either. And in professional sports, hesitation is rejection in slow motion. Meanwhile, the comparisons intensified again. Caitlin Clark, Paige Buchanan, Alia Boston, players who showed up, stayed visible, stayed aligned. The contrast wasn't fair, but it was fatal, because perception doesn't care about fairness. It cares about patterns, and Angel Reese now had a pattern. 3 seasons, 3 disappearances, different reasons, same ending. The internet didn't miss it. Clips stitched together, timelines built, coincidence, became a meme. Every injury announcement was questioned, every absence scrutinized. And the more Angels stayed silent, the louder the conclusions became. Chicago, for their part, moved on publicly. No shade, no drama, just basketball. That calm response hurt more than any statement ever could, because it signaled closure, and closure doesn't ask permission. Angel Reese wasn't losing her talent, she wasn't losing her fanbase, she was losing something far more valuable: leverage. In this league, leverage is everything. Without it, you don't dictate terms, you accept them. And the next decision, whether it's a trade, a separation, or a complete reinvention, won't be hers alone anymore. Because the story has already escaped her control. And the next headline, it won't ask what happened, it will declare what's over. And now it comes down to one final moment, not a game, not a stat line, not even a statement, but a choice. Because Angel Reese is standing at a crossroads the league never prepares you for. This isn't about Chicago anymore. This is about identity, about whether she doubles down on the chaos, or burns everything down and rebuilds from scratch. Reinvention or resistance, silence or explosion, redemption arc, or permanent fracture. The league is watching. Front offices are watching. Sponsors are watching. And most importantly, fans are watching, waiting to see if this was the moment Angel Reese lost control, or the moment she takes it back. So now I want to hear from you. Did the Chicago Sky finally do what they had to do, or did they push away a star they'll regret losing forever? Was Angel Reese mistreated, or did she sabotage herself when leadership mattered most? And here's the real question nobody wants to ask out loud. Is this the end of Angel Reese as a franchise cornerstone, or the beginning of the most dangerous comeback the WNBA has ever seen? Drop your thoughts in the comments, but don't hold back. This debate is already tearing the fanbase in half. If you want the next update the moment it drops, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because the next chapter of this story is going to hit harder, messier, and louder than anything so far. And trust me, this saga isn't over, it's just getting started. Trust me, this saga isn't over, it's just getting started.